Hello, I'm Cheryl Kalisch Gordon, Senior Commodities Analyst with RaboResearch. Today I'm here at Innovation Generation 2022. It's day 2 and I'm joined by the CEO of Grain Growers and the hosts of Innovation Generation, David McKeon.
Yeah, great to be with you today, Cheryl.
Yesterday, Dave, I understand we talked about in some of the sessions the opportunities and the challenges that the whole room and some of the speakers saw for the grains industry. Can I start with some of the challenges that were talked about?
Yeah, Cheryl, it's so fantastic to have 250 young farmers from right around Australia getting together to talk about and facing some of those opportunities and challenges. When we look at those, I guess, big issues that are coming over the horizon, some of the discussion points over the last few days have been some of those, how the global world is changing, with geopolitical forces, but also what our markets are desiring and how we as Australian farmers are going to adapt to meet those changing requirements into the future.
So are farmers, the young farmers that are here, seeing that as an opportunity and getting proactive about what they see ahead of them, or is it daunting?
Yeah, Cheryl, this is the fantastic thing about Australian agriculture at the point in time we're in. We've had, I guess, a couple of run of good seasons. We've also got buoyant commodity prices, so there's a lot of positivity in the sector. And I think we're really seeing that rub off in the young people at the conference here over the last few days, is they're really looking at those challenges as opportunities and looking at how they can make the most from their farming business through the supply chain to position Australian grains in a really strong space. So whether it is some of those driving market factors, whether it is the challenges of carbon farming and carbon and cropping in Australia, or whether it is the uptake of ag technology, they are all looking at optimistically how we can position ourselves.
Turning to that AgTech point you just made, what are the specific opportunities that have been identified over the last day and a half?
Yeah, Cheryl, there's been a really big discussion around how we not just capture data, but how we really utilise that. There's also been some really important discussions and really in-depth discussions around data ownership, data use, but how we can also mobilise that data for the best interests of the whole industry, but then also in ways that farmers can directly use that themselves.
And this morning we had a panel on sustainability and carbon. What were your top 2 takeouts from that?
Yeah, a couple of really big points that struck home with me around that conversation is where our emissions come from in the grains industry. It is really important that we're starting to baseline ourselves as an industry. We're starting to look at that. We've got to bring that down to the on-farm level. The really important part there that it probably is not so common knowledge is that 40% of our emissions are what are described as Scope 3 emissions. They're emissions captured further up the supply chain in the production of our farm inputs and our fertiliser and chemicals. That's probably the first key point that I'd touch on. The other one is our markets are changing. So, the consumers right now and into the future are more and more looking at how they can buy a lower carbon footprint in their beer, in their noodles, in their bread, and that's going to flow through to the farm gate.
And of course that's because the Scope 3 for those processors and retailers of those products really is captured in what we're selling to them as an industry. So they're looking to us to really help them out with their burdens of carbon. If we turn back to that carbon, one of the things that surprised me this morning was the few hands that were raised when looking at who had put their own farms through a carbon calculator. Did that surprise you?
Look, carbon discussions have been around in Australia for probably a number of decades now. One of the challenges is it's been really difficult to get the science and the technology at a really applicable on-farm level. We still have got a lot of work here to go in Australia before we've got all farmers baselined across Australia. So look, it's something we're all working hard collectively, so that's industry, that's organisations such as Rabobank, and that's farmers themselves. We're working really, really close, but we've got a little way to go before we've got a really close handle on what it's meaning on farm for individual farmers.
I'd be hoping by next Innovation Generation we get a show of hands on a few more that have played around with those numbers and just got a sense of what the drivers are for their farm and their emissions. Turning to the fun side of things, this isn't just about business, this is about networks of farmers, like-minded farmers, to share stories and insights across the nation. What's been happening on the social front? You had the dinner last night.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the fantastic things around events such as Innovation Generation is the social side of things. Getting farmers, again, from across Australia, out of their rural communities, coming together with like-minded farmers and agribusiness professionals from around Australia. So yeah, absolutely, we've had some fantastic, we had a dinner last night, we've got some tours today looking at some fantastic supply chains, here in the Sydney region, where farmers will get an insight into those broader supply chains at a practical level, but also the opportunity to meet their like-minded peers, share ideas and consider how they can collaborate and get involved in the future.
I think there's a little bit more socialising and a little bit more intel to go over the next day and a half. I hope the days 2 and 3 go really well.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Cheryl.